Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. I have prepared a very special presentation for you today. We're going to hit you with the 22-inch rims on this one, for sure. Dug really deep here, went into the archives, pulled out a tremendous amount of information. I believe it's going to be the deepest comprehensive investigation of this case. It's a very special case to me. I put a lot of legwork into this, so I certainly hope you appreciate the work that we put into this. Now, today, this presentation specifically has to do with the United States Marine. Time frame is December 1963. And out of the clear blue, a United States Marine is called out of bed. He's stationed at the photo that you see here, Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, North Carolina. So he's called at night, and we'll move on to the next slide here, and we'll continue with the presentation just to show you where this is. Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, North Carolina, located just a little bit north of Havelock, North Carolina. And he's told to board a transport plane that has no windows. He doesn't know what direction he's going. He doesn't know where he's going to end up. And when he finally lands at this location, and he was kind of a guard within the United States Marine. This is December 1963, literally weeks after President John F. Kennedy was assassinated in Dealey Plaza, November 22nd, 1963. So he gets off this plane. This could be a US Navy facility, could be a US Air Force facility. This could be a US Army facility. He didn't even know where this plane landed. He gets off the plane, he walks to this building, it looks like a hangar. They open up the hangar doors, and what do they see? What do they see? Went ahead and did a drawing for you here. He sees a 40-foot diameter dish-shaped craft. It's about 15 feet tall. It looks like a fat hamburger. That's the best way to describe this thing. It looks like a fat hamburger. It has about 9 elliptically shaped windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Now, these windows, they really had this opaque type appearance to them. You could not see them. They were kind of smoke colored, so they were difficult to see through it. That's something he mentioned. And he also mentioned that there was a 1-inch lip between the outer surface of the skin itself of the craft and then the outer portion of the window. There was this small 1-inch lip there. Also, he mentioned that it had kind of a chrome aluminum reflective appearance. It was seamless. There were no bolts, there were no rivets, there were no fasteners of any kind. There was no means of propulsion that he could see, no visible exhaust port. So again, 40 feet tall, 40 feet across, 15 feet tall. Now, if you look here, now his job was to guard this craft for a period of 2 weeks. This is at a location approximately 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina. And you can see here, I've got the dimensions on here, and I'll just go through some of the brief call outs here. So we talked about the surface finish, and we're going to do this very slowly here so we get all the information. Polished aluminum exterior. Craft contains smoke glass windows. Attempted entry with a cutting torch failed. Craft was seen at an undisclosed military base. Craft departed facility on a flatbed trailer. Okay, so if you look here, you can see that there was a very faint outline of a hatch or doorway. And he said that this outline was so fully integrated into the craft that you could not put a razor blade in between this thing. So that's how fully integrated this hatchway was. Now, if you look here, ladies and gentlemen, at these red dots, you'll see that these were the attempted points of entry. So there were multiple teams of these white lab coat technicians that were trying to gain access to the interior of this craft. Now, he mentioned, this is all from the Marine here, and I did a 2-hour interview with the gentleman who actually interviewed this Marine back in 1986. So we've got that testimony on file as well. These red dots are the attempted points of entry, and they tried 3 methods. The first method was diamond tip drill bits. That didn't work at all. Second thing they tried was an acetylene torch. That didn't work at all. Then they brought in these 2 18-wheeler tractor trailers that had these power generating devices on them. And they had these 3-inch cables. And these 3-inch cables led from the tractor trailers inside this facility, and they were used to power a laser. And they actually were putting a laser on the outside exterior skin of this craft. And when they moved the laser away, there was no effect whatsoever. So it's debatable, ladies and gentlemen, if they even ever got inside this craft at all. So that's a question we should always consider as well. Now, I want to mention that this entire craft was propped up on scaffolding about 5 feet. And they built a catwalk around this thing so that you could walk around this basically at eye level. So it's very important, and this will come up a little bit later in our presentation here. They absolutely built a catwalk so you could walk around this thing, and that was done by the scaffolding. Now, if you look to the right here, I've got a detailed view here, indented window lip detail. So again, there was this 1-inch lip between the outer exterior of the craft and then the outer exterior of these smoke-colored opaque windows. That's something that he absolutely defined that, he highlighted that, and we'll go ahead and move through these bullet points, and I'm just going to keep on drilling down on this so that we really cover all the information here. Now, number one, craft was seen at an undisclosed military location 3 hours by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina. Number two, entire craft was surrounded with what looked like standard military aircraft scaffolding. Just keep on drilling that down here. A white circle was taped or painted to the floor, which outlined the prohibited area for Air Force generals. Between 3 to 4 U.S. Marines guarded the craft while it was temporary in the hangar, and the windows of the craft were indented toward the interior, forming a 1-inch lip. See detail B. We just talked about that. The primary eyewitness secretly took a photograph of the saucer. We'll talk about that, which was later lost in a flood. A team of between 20 to 50 engineers examined the craft, but were unable to gain access to the interior. Again, this is December 1963. Now we'll move on to the next slide here. And this was done by John McNeil to give you a full color rendering of what this entire scene looked like here. We'll move on to the next slide now. Okay, so now we're inside this facility. You can see the white circle painted on the floor. You can see military personnel. They're guarding the facility. Now, he was there for 2 weeks at a time, and he was kind of the head of security for this entire operation. Again, we've got the white painted circle on the floor. You can see these 2 thick gauge wires coming from those power generating devices on the trailer, and they're shining a laser on the skin of the craft, and it had no effect whatsoever. Now, keep in mind, we've got the lab coat technicians. He definitely talked about multiple teams of lab coat technicians that were trying to gain access to the interior of this craft. Can you imagine this operation? Tremendous operation. The scaffolding is important. The altitude above the floor, that was approximately 5 feet. So we'll go ahead and move on to the next slide. Now I'm going to peel back all of the scaffolding. We're going to take away all of the military guards personnel. We're going to remove the toolbox. We're going to take out the laser. We're going to go ahead and take out all of the lab coat technicians. And I want to give you an idea what this might have looked like if it was actually just hovering off the floor by itself. Just want to show you that. And this is what it might have looked like, ladies and gentlemen. Now you can just imagine this fully integrated craft, no seams, no rivets, no visible means of propulsion, no fasteners, no bolts that you can get at Ace Hardware. We're talking about a fully integrated craft here. And they're trying to break into this in December 1963. Who knows what they've done, what technology they've procured at this point. And we'll go ahead and continue now. This is a drawing that was done by a good friend of mine now, and he did a really good job discussing this, Jose Sanchez. And you can see what they're trying to do here. They're inside the hangar, they're up on the scaffolding, they're by this lower location where the hatchway was. And remember, that was so fully integrated, you could not put a razor blade in between there. And you can see they've got this power drill with the diamond tip drill bits, and they're trying to gain access to the interior of this craft. Nothing at all happened. In fact, it started damaging the drill bits. So that didn't work. Very well done by Jose Sanchez here. We'll keep moving. Now, I want to bring your attention to this. Hangar 18. I'm sure everyone within this field remembers this B sci-fi movie. I mean, it's not even, you can't even recommend it. It's a really poor movie. It hasn't aged well. It's kind of amateurish, but I want to highlight three important things here that are secretly encrypted into this movie. And I always wondered, where did they get the idea for some of the concepts that were portrayed in this movie? Now, number one, it came out in 1980. I don't necessarily recommend this movie. It's really got an amateur feel to it, but let's talk about a couple of things that are in this movie that are very coincidental to the case we're talking about today. Now, number one, there are white lab coat technicians within this movie. Absolutely, they're shown within this movie. Number two, they show scaffolding around this entire facility here. They've got scaffolding off to the left. They've got scaffolding kind of off to the right. So there's this scaffolding. And then there's a very interesting incident with a laser. If you watch this movie, you can get this on YouTube and it's free. If you watch this movie, somewhere around the 50% mark, these technicians go into this craft and they're trying to figure out the propulsion system, how this thing works, what's the navigation system. And one of these guys pulls out this drawer and a laser comes out and damages a mainframe computer. Isn't that interesting? So there's a laser and then there's damage. Well, according to the Marine who was at this facility back in December 1963, a very similar incident happened where they were shining the laser on the exterior of the craft. It bounced off the exterior of this flying saucer and went up and damaged a ceiling panel. So is Hollywood kind of being used as a belated designer leak for something that actually took place? Is that where they got the idea for this accident within this facility? Very good question to examine. And we'll continue on here. Now, this is a brand new world exclusive, ladies and gentlemen, world exclusive, never been seen before. This is the first time we'll go ahead and present this now. This is a drawing by my good friend and artist, Rudy Gardea. We just finished this recently. And you can see now, the last day that he was in this facility, he was guarding it for 2 weeks. And basically, the last day he was there, it was no longer on the scaffolding. They had moved it onto an 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck, and they were putting a tarp over the craft. And then what they were doing is they were positioning the tarp so it completely conceals the craft, and they were putting chains and ropes over the tarp to secure it from prying eyes. And that was like the last time he saw this thing. So it's very important that one way they compartmentalize this information having to do with these alleged crash retrievals, and one way they can keep this secret, is no particular saucer stays in one place for any length of time. They keep on moving these from place to place. And that's one way that they're able to keep this a secret. And all roads appear to lead to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, with others as well. So this is a drawing by Rudy Gardea. We're hitting you with a full exclusive here. Now we'll go ahead and move on now. So what proof do I have, right? Is this just science fiction? Am I just making this up? What proof do I have? Well, approximately 13 years ago, going through the Leonard Stringfield cases, this particular case was in there. And they had kind of a rough sketch. And I thought, I have got to follow up. I've got to find the person responsible for bringing this out. This is within the Leonard Stringfield collection. I got the name of the gentleman who actually interviewed the U.S. Marine. And they sat down in 1986. They did a full interview. And I spoke to this gentleman. He gave me access to his private notes. And, ladies and gentlemen, we got another world exclusive here. He gave me access and copies of the original sketch by the United States Marine. And what you're looking at here is his original sketch on this kind of yellow notebook paper. It's a little bit on the amateur side, but it gives you an idea of what this whole scene looked like. This is one from the Marine himself. So you can see the craft up on the scaffolding. You can see this 5-inch gap, a 5-foot gap from the bottom of the craft to the floor of the concrete hangar section. Again, you've got the scaffolding. You've got these hamburger shaped configuration off to the right. You've got that integrated seamless kind of doorway or hatchway. You've got the elliptical windows wrap around the outer circumference of the craft. And then look off to the right and the left, folks. Check this out. You've got this well-lit section. He absolutely mentioned that this entire interior hangar area was very well lit. There were no shadows. And so it was a very well-lit environment. And this is a world exclusive. This is his original sketch. And we'll move on here. Now, this was done by the gentleman who actually interviewed the Marine. A little bit more of a refined drawing. So again, we've got this 5-foot dimension, we've got the scaffolding, we've got the catwalk, we've got the elliptical shaped windows, but take a look to the left here. A little bit difficult to see, but you can see on this side view here, if you look off to the left of the craft, you see this 1-inch gap, and it's actually integrated into this drawing. So again, this 1-inch gap that was from the outer part of the craft itself and the outer window, this very interesting 1-inch gap. And we'll continue to move on here. Now take a look at this. Here's an original drawing, and these have been released for the very first time here, world exclusive. You've got the laser, you've got the scaffolding, you've got the hamburger-shaped craft up, propped up about 5 feet, and then you see where it impacted or made contact with the craft itself and then bounced and hit the ceiling panel. This is exactly what happened within the testimony of the United States Marine. This is, again, December 1963 when he was there, and then he was interviewed in 1986. And we'll move on to the next slide here. Now, I want to mention something very important. He was there for a period of 2 weeks, and he was kind of the head of security. Now, there was one day just prior to this craft leaving that location where, ladies and gentlemen, he was alone with this craft, all by himself. And since he was in charge of security, he checked and frisked people to see if they had any cameras, but nobody checked him. So he secretly smuggled in one of these small German pocket cameras. It's called a Minox camera. And he's actually snapped a photograph of this thing. Can you believe this? He actually snapped a photograph. And when the gentleman that I spoke to who interviewed this Marine, what he actually said, and this is from the Marine himself, quote, "Someday I will tell this story, and by God, people are going to believe me. However, ladies and gentlemen, that particular photo was lost in a flood during 1983. So we were this close. We were so close of getting this evidence, but it's always 2 steps ahead. So we're going to continue on here. So such a tragic situation, so close. Now, I went ahead and did a breakdown of all the relevant bullet items. And we're going to go through this very slowly. Generally, I don't do a lot of reading in these presentations, but I felt that this is so important. We have got to drill down and get all of the information out to preserve an important part of our national history. Now, again, number 1, event occurred during December of 1963. Number 2, the Marine stated that he was flown in a military transport plane with no windows approximately 2.5 to 3 hours from Marine Corps Air Station, Cherry Point, North Carolina, in an unknown direction to an undisclosed location. Number 3, could it possibly have been an island or the Bahamas? Number 4, his job was to guard a flying saucer 40 feet across by 15 feet thick for a period of 2 weeks. He was a corporal in the U.S. Marines, actually was a sergeant, at the time of the incident, and was involved in weapons tech. Number 5, the object had a polished mirror exterior finish and incorporated a 1-inch lip around the windows, which had the appearance of smoked glass. And we'll move on to the next one here. The craft was constantly well lit, and you didn't need a flash on his Minox camera when he took that photograph. Okay, next group here. Number 7, the craft appeared totally seamless, with the exception of a hatch-like outline near the lower portion, which was so fully integrated into the exterior surface that you, quote, could not get a razor blade in the crack, end quote. Next one, the UFO had no landing gear, no fins, no exhaust ports or protrusions of any kind. Number 9, during the 2-week period that he guarded the craft, he witnessed a technical crew working on the flying saucer who were attempting to gain access to the inside. So we already talked about the 3 things, and we'll review that right here. Number 1, they tried diamond tip drill bits. That didn't work. Number 2, they tried an acetylene torch. That didn't work. Number 3, they tried a high-powered laser. And basically the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen, all attempts to exceed the tensile strength of the material and breach the outer hull of the craft failed. Even now, after all these years later, well after 50 years later, we don't know if they ever got in this craft. Number 10, The Marine stated that he knew details of several other UFO crash retrieval operations, including one where 3 bodies were pulled out of the craft. And he stated that he saw documents on the bodies and another crash. The bodies measured 29 inches tall with no thumbs. And we'll move on here. Now, I've also put down some code red statements that this Marine had made. I've labeled this code red statements here. Number 1, we've got quite a few craft and bodies now. Isn't that interesting? Now, this is someone who's seen the craft with his own eyes. Number 2, this is interesting. I had to pull and dig deep to get this. He overheard 2 civilian scientists talking about aliens in coded jargon, and they used the term Mary equals aliens. So that's got to mean something, right? Mary equals aliens. Interesting. Next one. He specifically stated that he saw color-coded security areas with corresponding colored badges worn by various personnel involved. The Marine was told to shoot anyone who violated the system. So let's talk about an example here. So we'll just run through these here. If you had a green badge, you could go here, but not there, okay? So kind of limited access. If you had a yellow badge, you were allowed to maybe go to this part of the retrieval operation or this part of the reverse engineering operation, but you couldn't go there. If you had a red badge, you had total access to the entire operation. So you'd want to have this red badge. And we'll continue on with the next one here. Again, this is code red statements here. Number 4, this is continuing on. During the time frame that he guarded the flying saucer, he held an interim top secret security clearance. Number 5, his career in the U.S. Marines involved guarding REUW material that's had to do with nuclear weapons. Continuing on here, he took a photograph of the craft with a small German pocket camera, which he smuggled into the area. He was responsible for frisking and checking everyone coming into the area for cameras, but nobody frisked him. Next one, comment from the wife. This is from his wife. Quote, I doubted the story until I saw the picture. Now I'll never forget it. Can you believe seeing this picture, seeing it for the first time, and you've got the evidence right in front of you here? Incredible. Let's move on here. Number 8, this is important. The Marine heard of an underground base in a Western state, which he couldn't or wouldn't name, where the craft he guarded is now kept. The base is known by its map grid coordinates. I wonder where that could be. And features sliding panels covered with vegetation that reveal helipads that lower into the ground like aircraft carrier elevators. So what I've got here, I just have a photograph. It shows you the carrier and it shows you the elevator going down from the flight deck to the hangar deck. So that's exactly what this Marine is describing. And we'll continue to move on here. Okay, so back to the primary notes here. This is 1986 when these notes were written down. A white circle was painted on the floor directly under the craft, which marked a restricted area that Air Force generals were not allowed to pass. The Marine stated that he personally had to stop the Secretary of the Navy from crossing the line. Next one, on the last day he witnessed the craft, it was being loaded onto a flatbed trailer and military personnel were securing a tarp over it to conceal it during transport to another facility. Apparently, recovered flying saucers are moved from base to base for security reasons and to prevent detection. Now, I've listed the top candidates of where these craft may have been taken. Number 1, above all, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And then we're moving on to the next one here, MacDill Air Force Base. Jack Pickett, a good friend of mine, long time ago had talked about craft being stored at MacDill Air Force Base, and they're having a very interesting library there with pictures, photos, drawings, illustrations, gun camera footage, 8x10 black, white glossy, color photographs, motion picture film reels at a interesting, secure library at MacDill Air Force Base. Of course, Norton Air Force Base plays a role in all this. Langley Air Force Base, and then Eglin Air Force Base as well, where they have underground liquid nitrogen cooling vaults for the preservation of bodies that were recovered. This is at Eglin Air Force Base. Next one, he was then told to report to G2. This is after the craft had left, he was told to report to G2 Base Intelligence Office and sign a security oath. And he was told that if you say anything about this, it's 10 years in Leavenworth if you talk. That's what he stated there. Now, next one. At the time of the interview, 1986, the Marine was in his late 40s and was married with 4 children. So he could still be alive today. We need to track this gentleman down. Now, I have his name. I have his name. I have a first name of his wife, and don't know the name of his children, but this is back in 1986. He was 40 years old. So somehow we need to get some assistance to track this gentleman down. So if anyone can help me find this gentleman, contact me. It's important to preserve an important part of our national history. We'll move on here. Okay, so of course, that's all I needed was to get a name, right? We need to find out who this U.S. Secretary of the Navy, Paul Neitz, November 29th, 1963 to June 30th, 1967. He stated that he almost shot this Secretary of the Navy for breaching that line that was painted on the concrete floor of this hangar facility. So this would have been the man who saw the craft. He was probably responsible for some part of it, but might not have been responsible for all of it. If he was, he wouldn't have been challenged by the Marines. So again, this is our gentleman, Paul Neitz, United States Secretary of the Navy, November 29th, 1963 to June 30th, 1967. That covers the December 1963 timeframe when this Marine was there. This is back in 1963. We'll continue on here. Now, what other type of confirming evidence do I have to support this? Or am I just making this up? Or do we have any other evidence? I want to, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to 4-star Major General Melvin F. McNichol. Melvin F. McNichol, very important name. He was base commander at Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. And we'll move on here. Why is this important? Here we go. Just to prove that he was the commander. Ex-Tinker commander Melvin McNichol dies. Newspaper clipping, the Daily Oklahoman, July 11th, 1986. So I've got the newspaper clipping here of his obituary, just showing you that we did do the legwork. Now, he was very good friends with Charlotte Mann, who played a very interesting role in the 1941 Cape Girardeau crash retrieval. They were good friends. Melvin McNichol and Charlotte Mann were very good friends. They had this mutual interest in UFOs. And so Charlotte Mann turns to General McNichol and says, you know what, General, we've been friends for a long time now, and I have this interest in UFOs. I believe you've got this interest in well, and you've never told me anything. Are you my friend? Are we still friends here? You've never told me anything. This general, this is according to Charlotte Mann, she gave a lecture at IUFOC about 3 years ago. She mentioned this. General turns to Charlotte Mann and says, Charlotte, if you ever repeat what I'm about to tell you, I'll deny it and it can end my career. Now, here's what he told Charlotte Mann. Number one, he saw a UFO which was located in the West. Okay, number one. Number two, he walked around a UFO on a catwalk, which was propped up on scaffolding. Number three, bodies were recovered and one was still alive. Ladies and gentlemen, what did we just consider? What did we just talk about a U.S. Marine who he guarded a flying saucer that was in the West? Well, if you go by plane from Cherry Point, North Carolina, 3 hours by plane, that could technically, theoretically put you within the West. So that checks out. Number two, we just heard that the Marine said that they had scaffolding. They had a catwalk that they built all around the craft itself, and they propped it up by scaffolding. This is exactly what the general is describing. Number three, bodies were recovered and one was still alive. He had talked about bodies. He had talked about how long they were, how tall they were. They had no thumbs. He talked about other crash retrievals. So ladies and gentlemen, we've got independent confirmation from this general who's talking about virtually the identical craft, the identical situation. It could in point of fact be the exact same craft. So we've got independent confirmation. And when I heard that from Charlotte Mann, I said, boom, I got one. I got it. It's a true case. We've got independent confirmation. So what's the bottom line, ladies and gentlemen? What is the final word here? The question is, could the public handle the truth regarding UFO disclosure? So Instead of me giving you my impression, let me take you to the person who saw the evidence firsthand with his own eyes. Here's a direct statement by the Marine himself. Now, remember, he guarded this thing. He saw it with his own eyes. Here's what he said. There's a certain amount of people who, if the thing was on display down the street, would still rather stay home and watch football. Statement by U.S. Marine, August 26, 1986. So here you can see, we've got the football players, right? Back in 86. They would much rather watch football than have this UFO disclosure. There are some people that don't have a curious bone in their body, and you won't change that. But according to this Marine, we're ready. It would almost be old hat to some people. Now, obviously, there would be some implications. There would be some slight, very, you could say, difficulties getting through this. But according to this Marine, it's a done deal. We're already done. It is so beyond the question now that we could handle it. We're ready to move on here. And according to this Marine, it's a done deal. We're ready to move on. So again, I want to thank you for your attention. I hope this information is valuable to you. I would do this even if I didn't get any support, because it's a personal crusade and I want to preserve an important part of our national history. Please like, share, subscribe. Let's get the information out there. Let's get the cover-up destroyed. Let's end the secrecy embargo. And I want to thank you for your attention. Have a good night.